Dear Lord, I pray that you give me the perfect words that people need to hear. If you are a woman who's struggling with chronic illness and your husband is trying his best but doesn't understand, this video is for you. If you are a man who is watching his wife suffer and it is killing you inside, this video is for you. Whether you are dealing with something like Lyme disease or long COVID or multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia, or toxic mold, all of those things wreak havoc. If you are a woman hearing this and you struggle to articulate the chaos and the fear and the chronic distress that you feel throughout your entire body all the time, if you struggle to give that words, even within your own mind, and especially if you struggle to share it with your loved ones, I encourage you to please listen to this with your partner. And if you're a man who struggles to even comprehend what's going on, who feels the burden so immensely, so crushingly, in ways that words fail you, I'm going to do my best to honor you by giving words to what you're dealing with. So my name is Nicholas Joel Farrar. You might be wondering what insight a relatively young man such as myself might have. I grew up with my life defined by chronic illness. I was not the only sick one in my household. I'm 33 years old and I'm unmarried. However, I am in relationship with a woman who is 25 years older than me. We are very committed to each other. Growing up in a home defined by extreme chronic illness, defined by struggle, defined by health crisis after health crisis, a life and a childhood defined by all resources going into saving my life and my mother's life, and my dad working around the clock to do so. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how illness affects a family and how it affects a marriage. So I'm going to speak in a way that reflects what I've learned throughout a lifetime of studying illness and health. I've dealt with extreme chronic Lyme disease. I'm a grown-up Make-A-Wish kid. I was a board member of a Lyme disease nonprofit. And I have talked to so many couples who struggled. And I provide consultations to men and couples. So I'm given insight into how illness affects relationships. And typically it is the woman that struggled with her health. And it's a whole different conversation when the man is struggling with health issues. And typically one follows the other. Because when dealing with extreme chronic illness, I say it's a game of triage. What that means is it's like an emergency room. The person who has the most severe issue gets addressed first, and everyone else's needs fall by the wayside. If someone is actively bleeding, you need to stop the bleeding to save their life. And the men who stick around, who don't abandon their partner, which is frequently what happens, is people run away during times of stress. So if you have a man who hasn't run away from the horror that is chronic illness, please give him appreciation and vocalize it. And you may think that you've already said enough about appreciating your man in regards to sticking by your side and helping you, but I promise you, you cannot repeat it enough. You cannot give him enough encouragement of expressing your respect for him standing by you. I'm also going to be speaking in a way that the more liberal people would refer to with fancy words such as antiquated, heteronormative, patriarchal thinking. Because I'm old school, okay? I believe a man should lead his family. I believe it's a man's responsibility to provide leadership to the woman he is committed to. And doing that while dealing with a health crisis and an ongoing chronic illness is exceptionally difficult. It is likely the most difficult thing anyone individually and collectively in their relationship will ever face. Illnesses destroy marriages. They destroy finances. They destroy intimacy. They often destroy happiness. Do not despair. I believe all of those things can be restored. Navigating that is very tricky. So I believe men are the natural leaders and protectors of their families. And it is immensely difficult for strong men to have an invisible enemy. It's nerve-wracking and it's demoralizing. Because I promise you, the committed men in your life who have been doing their best to help you navigate through the maze of illness, the maze of the health world, whether you're in the standard medical system or you're on a holistic path. It is so much to navigate. And if the problem, if the illness could be represented by one singular physical enemy, if it was a human intruder, most men that I know, including myself, would, without hesitation, brutally neutralize that threat. And the fact that there is not one singular enemy to be brutally destroyed, the fact that it comes in 1,000 different invisible ways, it is just so incredibly messed up. And it causes a lot of psychological distress. So whether you are dealing with something like Lyme disease or long COVID or multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia, or toxic mold, all of those conditions wreak havoc on the nervous system that when you're in the midst of that fog, it's easy to become lost, and you can lose your sense of self and the person you thought you were. And that's not only difficult for the person who is personally losing their identity, it's very difficult for the person who loves that previous identity. It can be very scary for a couple because it changes both of them. It doesn't just change one person. And it's easy to be in love when times are simple and not complicated. When you have freedom to travel, when you have fun, when you're able-bodied and you're just able to roll with the punches and keep on going. That's like what some would refer to as a honeymoon period. And it's similar to before a couple has children, that everything changes after that. And I'm saying that as someone who does not have children. But I've seen it, that just like everything changes and it brings out sides of personalities that were never seen before, and that can be incredibly difficult to deal with, that happens with illness, happens with any significant life change and trauma. So I'm going to vocalize what I felt within myself of dealing with extreme chronic Lyme disease, and also what I've seen both in partners who have dealt with mental or physical illness, and also from couples that I've met over decades. The level of fear and terror, and I'm going to speak about the woman's perspective, the level of terror that a woman feels when she is neurologically compromised, when her nervous system has turned against her, it puts that woman into such a state of fear that literally everything and anything becomes a potential enemy. And when a woman does not feel safe in her own body, it is the ultimate violation. Whether it's conscious or not, when a woman cannot trust her own body, she feels such an intense, undescribable feeling of violation and fear that it leads to paranoia against everything. And as men, we want to comfort our partners. We want to fix things. And so it can be extremely confusing and frustrating and maddening as a man when just asking what's wrong, like, honey, what's wrong? Okay, that can set off a whole cascade of events that can be really an absolute shit show to deal with, okay? And it's not a failure of the woman to be so easily provoked and thrown off balance, because all her stability at the very core of her being, unless she is incredibly spiritually rooted and mature, it's going to throw all of that off. And there's very rarely going to be a moment of stability. And when something is just always wobbling and always on the verge of going off a cliff, the slightest little poke, the slightest little bit of unexpected stimulation can just throw off that very, very precarious balance. And that makes sense within a nervous system that is perceiving everything as danger. Because within the nervous system of a chronically ill woman, especially if she's dealt with this illness for a number of years or maybe even decades, everything becomes a threat. Every person, every sound, every smell, every food, anything new and familiar is threatening and dangerous. And some people reach a space of such incredible trauma that they become like feral animals, and they will claw at anything that comes close to them, even if it's the person who loves them most, who is actually taking care of them, who is actually the safest person for them to be around. Even if the woman may consciously know that in her mind, in her nervous system, her partner is the enemy. And most people can't comprehend that. And understandably so. It is incomprehensible. It is so hard to deal with. And most people are ashamed to admit their feelings. When a woman is so incredibly sick, she doesn't want to admit in her own mind that when her husband attempts to help her, when he hugs her, when he tries to understand the issue and communicate with her, and especially with initiating intimacy, that she may very well perceive all of that as a threat and a pressure and an obligation and a burden, when the man is literally just trying to save her life. And it takes a very disciplined, patient man to feel that, to feel resentment, to feel fear from the person that he loves most, and to not take it personally. Another issue that happens when a man is trying to hold all the shit together and he has a partner who is incapable of handling things, incapable of tolerating the unexpected, because she is so incredibly chronically stressed that literally anything will push her over the edge. That means that the man has to step up in his place as the leader of the family. And he must put his own desires and wants and fears on the back burner or off the stove entirely, especially if there are kids. It is very, very difficult. And I do not envy anyone in that position with children involved. This is incredibly isolating for the husband, because the last thing he wants to do is put more on his partner's plate. And men are conditioned to hold things internally. And yeah, maybe our culture has shifted away and encouraged men to talk about their feelings. But that is a feminine approach that doesn't really work for most men. And there are few men who have a typical feminine therapy session of talking about an issue who suddenly feel way better. They don't. There are times where talking about an issue does indeed make the issue bigger and harder to deal with. So discussions must be handled in a very tactful way, a strategic way, because it's very hard to talk about things in the moment and not let things build up with a partner who can't handle anything more. If your partner is so incredibly stressed out and she's concerned about being a bad wife, she feels like she's not doing enough around the house, she feels like she's not satisfying her husband, she feels like she's being a bad mom, all these different things, the man is, the very last thing he wants to do is confirm any of those fears, and some of them may be legitimate. He may be dissatisfied. He may be lonely. He may be wondering where the person he fell in love with, where that person went, and if they're ever coming back. Because sometimes that person does not come back. Sometimes that old personality truly does die, never to be seen again. And couples have to reach a place that is a very scary, intimidating place of if they're willing to explore and get to know each other in an entirely new reality. And particularly when people have been in a relationship for 10, 20, 30 years, the place in between the beginning of that relationship And where things are currently, that can be a really big gap that is very hard to sort through. And so it's so isolating for men to hold everything inside and then not explode. And there's a real catch-22 that is a really, really unfortunate position for men to be in, where the wife literally cannot handle fucking anything more. She is absolutely maxed out, overwhelmed, and she may say that she can handle more. She may say that she needs to be trusted with the man to share his fears. She wants to know what's stressing him out. She wants to know the ways that she's falling short and how she can do better. But there is a primal understanding deep, deep within that man who knows that all of that is bullshit. And his wife literally cannot handle anything more. And if she truly knew the level of stress that he was under, when she is absolutely maxed out and paranoid and in distress chronically and dying because of it, slowly or fast, he knows that sharing the burden that he feels will push her over the edge. And it'll just add to her terror. And that is a very, very hard place for a man to be. It is not fun, to say the least. So this can create all sorts of conflicts. When emotions cannot be expressed in real time, and I think it's a matter of discipline as a man not to react emotionally to a situation. You can think of emotions as energy in motion. The E stands for energy, and it's moving. Emotion. So, if something happens and a man feels a surge of anger or fear, I believe it's a matter of discipline to not react. And instead, you want to be responding to the situation from a grounded place. Responsibility means your ability to respond. And an irresponsible man is someone who acts reactively without thinking. So this creates a really tricky situation. This creates a situation where a man cannot share his emotions in real time and either has to let them go completely and deal with them on his own, or what is more likely is they get pushed down. And it's not possible, unless you're a super enlightened, capable person that is far beyond me, it is not possible to constantly push down that level of emotions and burdens without it affecting you. And typically, most men who are strong, powerful men who prioritize the well-being of their family and they put themselves last, they push down their emotions for so long and they neglect themselves for so long that eventually they break. And it is a brutal break, and it is not pretty. But that may be a conversation for another day. So when men hold everything inside because it is neither safe nor wise that they share that burden with their woman who is already burdened, who is already not capable of thinking clearly, of handling things in a stable way, because the stability within her nervous system, within her mind, has been destroyed by chronic illness. that creates a catch-22 where there is not space for two people to be fearful. If both people are afraid in a situation of crisis, that means someone's going to die. Someone has to be level-headed. Someone has to take control. Someone has to put their own needs completely to the side and lead from a place of clear stability. On the outside, the woman may perceive this as, my husband doesn't care. My husband doesn't understand how freaked out I am. My husband doesn't understand how all these things are stressing me out. Why I'm so incredibly upset. Why is my husband not upset? You know, that's the thing that people that get really pissed off about a situation and they feel anger. If they feel like they're entitled to their anger, when they share what they're upset about with someone else and that other person doesn't get upset, they think that person doesn't understand them. Because any logical person would see the truth that it's something worth being angry about. Well, guess what? If you're in a relationship that is defined by struggle and doing your best to hold your shit together and move forward, there's no energy to waste on two people being pissed off. And so that is isolating for both partners, because the woman feels misunderstood and the man also feels misunderstood, but there's for different reasons. You know, and how this relates to intimacy within a marriage is just totally brutal and is another contributing factor for a high rate of divorce. I mean, the biggest, I don't have like the factoids, the figures in front of me for what contributes most, the statistics on divorces, but I know that money is typically number one. Sex is often number two in that. And if you have a severe chronic illness in your marriage, it is for sure affecting both your finances and your sex life. And chances are it's not doing either one of them any good. So that could be its own video for sure. But that does add to the isolation. And women, there's a phrase that I have read that is a very, very good phrase, which is, men have sex to feel better, and women need to feel better to have sex. Now, you may have been a high libido woman at the start of your marriage. Maybe you had a great honeymoon period, to put it politely. But if your nervous system is always in distress and you don't feel safe and literally everything is perceived as a threat, that is going to complicate things, to put it kindly. And unless your nervous system has been rewired by trauma to perceive danger as exciting, chances are you're just going to shut down. And it does not matter how much you intellectualize this to a man. In some ways, men are simple creatures. And it's not like you can't simplify it as just not meeting his sexual appetite. Men, very often, almost ubiquitously, as a rule, they perceive sex as both love and respect. Now, I want to really say this clearly so it is not misunderstood. This does not mean that a woman is obligated to put herself in a stressful, uncomfortable, harmful, traumatic situation to perform sexually, or else she is disrespecting her husband. That's not at all what I mean. What I mean is that when a woman surrenders to a man, when she literally and figuratively and spiritually and energetically opens up to receive her partner into the depth of her being, that is a signal of trust. That is a signal of respect. And you can tell your man all day long, he's great, he's awesome, he's a powerful leader, he's so great. And those words of affection can mean a lot. But if he does not feel it in his nervous system, it doesn't go to the core of him. There's a level of him that will always feel neglected, that will always feel like he is falling short, that he is not handling business, that he is failing his family. And that is a very complicated issue, and I don't have any easy answers for that. But I want to give insight, because for women it can be very confusing, and they may roll their eyes and think, oh, my husband's just, he's so horny, and he doesn't understand that, like, I'm living every moment in terror and distress, and I just want to scream all the time. Well, guess what? Your husband also probably wants to scream all the time. And he probably wants to just, like, go out and destroy things because he has such a level of frustration and confusion and shame. Shame is one of the biggest things that infects a marriage. And shame creates a very fertile ground for illness to grow. So these are a few things that come to mind that if you're struggling, I encourage you to talk about these things within your marriage and reflect upon them. Because a house that's divided falls. And I believe God created us for partnership, for strong marriages. I believe He created us to have intimacy and joy and health. And so stay hopeful, because things can change for the better. And true intimacy on a soul level, with two souls coming together and finding the spark of the Creator within each other in divine union, that intimacy is a form of worshiping God. And so I hope that if you watch this, that it gives you insight into what you're dealing with on either side of a relationship. And I hope that you find healing. Good luck.